So for those who are not aware, and I guess if you don't follow pro wrestling, you might not be aware of this. Earlier this month, almost at the start of this month, I think it actually took place on November 1st, WWE held its second of what is now basically its biannual pay-per-view events held in the nation of Saudi Arabia. It's Crown Jewel 2019, it was called. And like I said, they started this up last year, where the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia agreed to pay them a buttload of money to regularly hold 2 major pay-per-view events a year. And obviously this generates a lot of controversy because Saudi Arabia has a rather infamous reputation about human rights violations, how they've treated journalists and other individuals, diplomats and whatnot. All very valid concerns, all very valid critiques as to why WWE should dare do business with a nation like this, and that's probably a subject for another time. But here's what we're really talking about. It's what happened in the aftermath of this show. Because after the show was done, obviously everyone in WWE that was part of the show was getting ready to leave and head back to the United States. And there were supposedly 2 planes that were being used to transport people. The first plane that actually managed to leave Saudi Arabia on time was the one that contained Vince McMahon, Brock Lesnar, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and a number of other production people. That plane took off. There was a second plane that was to transport everyone else, which was reportedly more than 100 people. That plane did not take off on time. In fact, it turns out that flight got delayed by a little more than 24 hours. I think actually 25 hours is almost the exact number it got delayed. And this was a big problem, even for WWE in particular, especially because a number of the wrestling stars and other people that were on board that plane were expected to be present in Buffalo, New York, the very next night for a live broadcast of their show SmackDown. And this is just a month or so after they just started broadcasting on the Fox network. So this is a pretty big deal that they didn't have their superstars available that they were expected to be on SmackDown. They had to more or less call up a bunch of people at the last moment from their third branch, NXT, to have to come over and fill in spots. It's actually very similar to something that happened a few years earlier when a number of WWE stars who were on their Raw brand got stranded in Europe because a volcanic eruption around Iceland threw so much ash and smoke into the atmosphere above the Atlantic Ocean that all transatlantic flights were grounded for about a week. And it kept a lot of those wrestling stars who were doing a tour in Europe at the time stuck there. And they had to bring wrestlers from their other brand, SmackDown, to work Raw that very next night. However, here in the aftermath of this show incident, when that plane got delayed for 24 hours in Saudi Arabia, rumors and stories started spreading online. And they were being done so by people who claimed to be actual wrestling journalists. 2 people in particular. The famous Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, and Brad Shepard, who I can't remember exactly, what was he from again? Let me double check here. I think he's from, well, anyway, yeah, Brad Shepard of ProSportsExtra.com. Yeah, that's something really, that's a reliable place, I suppose. But, yeah, they were spreading the story that, and they were supposedly getting their number one source reporting this was former WWE Spanish announcer Hugo Savinovich. This was the story they were presenting. What actually happened was the wrestlers were being held there against their will, more or less. Supposedly, the full story that happened was that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was failing to pay Vince McMahon and the WWE the amount they were supposedly owed for the shows they put on there in Saudi Arabia. In retaliation for this, Vince McMahon ordered the television feed for the Crown Jewel show cut in Saudi Arabia, and then in response to that, the Saudi Arabian government ordered the plane to be grounded, not be able to take off. And there was talks about how there were military personnel surrounding the plane at the time, and they were basically being threatened or whatnot. And what made this even more upsetting was the fact that this supposedly would have happened after Vince McMahon's plane took off with him and all those other extreme top-level stars. And this was just something that the wrestling social media world just ate up, because this was candy to them. To think that, oh yeah, they went to this authoritarian nation to hold a show, and the authoritarian government ended up holding them against their will, and the dictatorial chairman of WWE left them to their fate and whatnot. The moment I saw this story, there were a number of things that just didn't make sense to me. About a number of different things. So I'm going to bring this up in just a bit, but I really didn't want to talk about it especially because I have a lot of friends. They're good friends. They're fellow wrestling fans, and they really believe something like this. And again, it's the problem where if I dare suggest that this might not have happened the way it happened, I get accused of being a shill for WWE. By the way, full disclosure, as of this broadcast, I haven't watched an actual WWE show. Very few of them, also ever since WrestleMania. It's just numerous reasons I haven't been interested in the programming anymore. I'm not really watching any other wrestling content right now in a long time. But no, I have not watched WWE programming almost at all since WrestleMania this year. So just keep that in mind. I really don't have that much of a dog in the fight. This is not me saying this as a fan of WWE. This is me saying this as a student of journalism who knows what you have to do if you want to be a journalist in order to put out an honest, accurate story. And once again, just like the situation with Disney Plus and all the rumors about them censoring Dumbo, this was not good journalism. All these wrestling reporters were going on were the claims of one former WWE employee who was not present in Saudi Arabia at the time this incident happened, and a few very vague posts on Twitter and the like from clearly frustrated wrestlers who were there. There wasn't anything specific. And then, of course, they tried to get evidence. WWE tried to collect evidence that what exactly happened was a mechanical problem with the plane. But, of course, no one believes this. So many people online don't want to believe this. They want to believe the story that the evil Saudi Arabian government, who, yes, is a corrupt government, you're not going to hear me say anything otherwise about that, and that the corrupt, evil WWE management conspired to leave their talent stranded in this country. Well, finally, someone actually did do a deep investigative story on this. It's a guy named Stan Morris who runs a site called the NEA Report. And for the record, NEA apparently stands for Northeast Arkansas. And I actually did some research into this guy. This guy is just a news journalist based in the Arkansas area who one day decided to create his own news site and do his own independent reporting. And he's a guy who apparently takes fascination in stories that might be off the beaten path, or, especially in a case like this, need to be delved further into. This is a guy who obviously read the story of what supposedly happened to these WWE stars in Saudi Arabia, became fascinated with it, and then his own journalistic mind kicked in and said, I want to learn more. I want to know more about this. And so he went and did his own reporting. This guy's website has some pretty good security on it to where I couldn't copy and paste text from the website onto a document. I can't share it with you on this live stream. I will link to it when I post this video on YouTube. But the website is from the NEA report. The story, the title of the story here is WWE Delays in Saudi Arabia Were More Than Mechanical, But Someone Is Lying. I'm going to try, I don't want to bore you with this whole story because it is very much in depth. This is as good a news story as I've seen in a long time. And let's see what here. Let's see what this guy first says here. Reasons for the delay were widely speculated online thanks to both unsourced reporting and cryptic social media posts by various athletes on the plane. The online speculation was made worse by the involvement of a foreign country criticized for human rights abuses, including the murder of dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi in their Turkish embassy. My apologies if I mispronounced that name. The most concerning rumor, receiving mention in articles by Fox Business, the New York Post, and Vice, was that performers were being held against their wills. That didn't happen. What did happen was more than just mechanical. It could probably be best summarized as a series of unfortunate events. However, after thorough research, it also appears that some wrestling journalists were either deceived by bad sources or simply reported misinformation for more devious purposes, as speculated by top WWE performer Seth Rollins. So anyway, I'm going to try to see if I can read through this and sum up basically whatever happened. So yeah, they were originally scheduled to leave Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, said no later than 3 a.m. local time Friday morning. The problems began when the plane was delayed by a tug that was malfunctioning. The executive told me the next problem was the plane was being tugged to the wrong spot. Not long after that, a Saudi VIP described to me as an executive of some level flew into the country. The chartered plane full of WWE talent had to be held back for that too. That's an important thing to have happened because that would explain the military presence that apparently was there at the airport. But again, as we'll later see, contrary to what some people want to tell you and believe, that military presence was never there at the WWE's charter flight. But it was there at the airport, and it did force a delay, not because they were intimidating the WWE stars, but that they were there to protect this Saudi VIP that flew in. As passengers were asking themselves why the delays were happening, the issue compounded by the variety of problems. At this point, there was another delay. This time, the issue was with the manifest. The Saudi military, police, and customs were unable to agree over a weight problem with the plane, a WWE executive told me. This was the only delay that involved any government official from Saudi Arabia as far as this reporter learned. It was described as a mere communication gap between the two sides. Then the plane apparently had to be refueled because of how long it had taken. It drained so much of the fuel from the plane. Then a sensor went off. A piece of equipment used in the fuel transfer between engines was shown to have a problem. This was more difficult to fix because, according to Jerry Lawler on his podcast, the part couldn't be purchased locally. It had to be flown in from Germany. This is apparently the problem, the exact problem that kept the plane from taking off. It was, in fact, finally was a mechanical problem involving a part they couldn't just up and replace. Apparently what happened later was, eventually, as the talent exited the plane, another challenge presented itself. They didn't have anywhere to stay. With over 100 people in tow, the group went to a hotel and began arduously checking in one at a time. It was yet another frustrating point in the long, long night for the stars. Despite that long process, wrestlers were given exclusive access to the hotel gym, and one described that evening as the best night's sleep he'd had in ages. So, what we have here is this Mr. Stan Morris has gone to a great deal of trouble describing point for point everything that supposedly happened that night. Not just going with cryptic tweets or what one guy who wasn't there present in Saudi Arabia says happened according to another guy's source. And then we have here, and then not only that, he also talks about how there was a peculiarity in which the plane was slightly, when the plane finally did take off, its route was slightly diverted, so it went more over the sea there. It went over the Mediterranean Sea rather than flying over the likes of Egypt, or is that I don't know what that nation is. I knew geography a long time ago, but the flight was slightly diverted. But then he goes further into it, and he actually goes to challenge the claims made by Hugo Savinovich. This is the one thing that got to me more than anything else. Savinovich said in a video that the Saudi government owed WWE almost $300 million for each show, $600 million total. He said Chairman Vince McMahon ordered executive producer Kevin Dunn to kill the television feed, and that Mohammed bin Salman, Deputy Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, had the talent removed from the plane as a result. Everything Savinovich said was wrong. The shows were 10 times less expensive than he estimated. There was never more than one report of a local broadcast issue, and that report said the show started late, the opposite of being cut off early. Now, it's the money thing that struck me more than anything else, because when I heard at first that they claims that WWE was owed $600 million for these shows, I immediately was wondering, where did he get that figure from? Everything I'd heard up to that point was that WWE was being paid roughly $20 million per show held in Saudi Arabia. And as of Crown Jewel 2019, they only put on 4 shows. I mean, you can do the math there. That's not even enough to total 100 million, let alone 600. And then he points out here that the conflicts here is as to whether or not they first said the show was cut off early, and then it somehow changed it to being, well, no, it wasn't cut off early, it was delayed. In fact, he shares a Twitter post here direct from Dave Meltzer, responding to someone called Hooked on Wrestling, claiming they are making stuff up, filling in massive blanks of speculation, stuff about the delay being in broadcast being related to the supposed late payments, that's being reported as fact, where's the source, stuff like that. Meltzer responded to that with, 1, the fact that the broadcast was delayed, 2, WWE's 10Q report that came out Thursday, ready to apologize now. Yeah, he's basically but again, so he points this thing out. Morris points this out, that according to WWE's financial reporting, they had been paid the speculated outstanding balance owed by Saudi Arabia one day before Crown Jewel, the show took place, and then points out that at one point, these wrestling reporters and their rumor mills are saying the feed was cut off early, And then now they're saying when that couldn't be verified, they said, oh no, it was being delayed. And the only source they have for that, as it says here, is one single viewer in Saudi Arabia who had reported problems with the feed. And then he goes even further, and this is a really long thing, to explain as to why they couldn't just get another plane. I don't want to go into full detail about this because it's very, very long. But, and again, I'm going to link to the story so you can watch it yourselves on the YouTube feed as well. But basically, this is one thing. So many people said, if it was just a mechanical problem, why couldn't they just get another plane? I mean, WWE should have the resources for that. Have you guys ever been stranded in a plane, or stranded in an airport where your flight isn't able to take off? Because I have. And you're having to wait to get another plane on standby. You're basically in purgatory. You're in limbo as it is. And this guy, and Morris here points it out that even if you don't factor in the cost, which he said it would have cost WWE about $500,000 to get business class tickets for every single star at last moment to fly out of Saudi Arabia. Even if you don't factor in the cost and says, well, hey, they're WWE, they're getting paid $20 million for the show, they should be able to chip that in. He points this out. That's assuming that many tickets could be found on short notice for the exact same trip. I'm going to tell you guys this. If I was on any type of business trip and my flight got delayed excessively for any particular reason, if my employer had the option of telling me, get yourself another flight out of here as soon as possible, whatever it takes, or instead tell me, don't worry about this, get yourself a hotel room, just rest and spend the night there, we're going to get this charter flight being taken care of, you're darn right I wanted to say the latter of those two. So just the idea that it seems like a lot of people who weren't there are jumping to their own conclusions about what they should have done. Again, there's a lot more, so much more as to just trying to, piece by piece, deconstruct everything that was in these rumors. But here's the main thing I wanted to point out. More than anything else, here's my list of how many sources Stan Morris has in this story. He cites AJ Styles, Jerry Lawler, Seth Rollins, Buddy Murphy, Rusev, anywhere from 1 to 4 other wrestlers, and anywhere from 1 to 5 WWE executives. It might not be that maximum number, but I'm pretty sure it's more than, he spoke with more than one WWE executive on this matter, though they obviously wanted to remain anonymous on the subject. He also lists WWE's financial reporting and flight information that apparently you can readily get from FlightAware.com. He lists them as a source. All Shepard and Meltzer list as a primary source is Hugo Savinovich. And in Meltzer's case, apparently one individual in Saudi Arabia who had reported problems with the television feed. This, all the way around, is bad journalism. This is picking up a rumor and running with it with no verification whatsoever, without doing due diligence to check your facts and get as many verification as possible. And just running with something that you know is going to generate traffic and the people are going to want to hear. And when I say want to hear, I'm not suggesting that anybody who read these rumors wanted anything bad to happen to the WWE stars that got delayed in Saudi Arabia. But they do want to hear any story that might confirm that Vince McMahon is basically a cartoon supervillain. And it's just the fact that it was a cartoon supervillain type attitude that will throw away this thing would make sense. That just, for me, questioned everything. That's the other thing. Look, you can say whatever you want about Vince McMahon and how he treats talent and how what you think impact, negative or positive, he's had on the world of wrestling. All that's understandable criticisms. But let's just take it from a business perspective. Why would Vince McMahon be perfectly okay with leaving so much of his important talent left stranded in another nation 10,000 miles away when he knows a good portion of that talent had to be present for a live televised show the very next day in New York State, when he just a month ago started a new broadcast contract with a major network in Fox that they're going to expect certain stars to be on that broadcast. You think he's going to want to talk about, he's going to shrug off the complaints he's going to get from Fox Network executives as to why those stars weren't going to be there? I get why a number of people don't like Vince McMahon, but sometimes you gotta use logic to explain it doesn't make any sense as to why he would do something like that. But you are willing to trust people who have a long history of getting stories wrong, getting facts wrong, getting rumors wrong in the last few years, with Dave Meltzer and Brad Shepard being one in particular. And you know what else happened? Again, I talked about all this on Twitter a few days ago. I linked to the Crown Jewel story on the NEA report on Twitter a few days ago. And I wasn't afraid to call Brad Shepard out, although I didn't link to him. And that's the important thing here. Because you want to know what happened? Let me bring this up right now. Brad Shepard actually responded to me on Twitter, as we see right here. I pointed that thing. It's with this that up there is my post where I decided to sarcastically call out Meltzer and Shepard and how untrustworthy they should be. And there, right there, as you can see, is Brad Shepard's response. Keep believing the official corporate story like a good little sheep. And obviously you can see there I made a response, a direct response to that about how, and down there, you can't see it right down there, but there is a link to the Crown Jewel story, the NEA report story right there. And yeah, I called them fake journalists that. I also later posted this, which said, it's not, this is the same response, the next response. The important thing here is, before I made these two posts, in direct response to Shepard's good little sheep tweet here, I had never directly tried to give mention or attention to Brad Shepard. I did not put his official Twitter handle on any of my own posts. I didn't respond to any of his own prior posts. So what that means is, in order for Brad Shepard to have responded to my Twitter posts, a guy who doesn't even, who I think has barely more than 900 followers on Twitter. I don't even have 1,000 Twitter followers. For him to respond to my post, for him to know about my Twitter post that mentioned that typed his name in there, this guy had to have been scouring Twitter for anyone mentioning him by name and calling him out on his little rumor mill story and daring to call them out too. Folks, that's what we call a paranoid little son of a you-know-what. Like, you want to be held to a high standard of being a journalist, a wrestling journalist, a sports news journalist. Because apparently you write for a sports website called ProSportsExtra.com. You know, that's the kind of stuff I do. And I'm not a journalist. I'm an entertainer. I'm a sarcastic son of a you-know-what who will say things, but even I, again, apparently have more journalistic integrity than Brad Shepard or Dave Meltzer. And someone else who definitely has a lot more journalistic integrity than Brad Shepard or Dave Meltzer is Stan Morris.